Welcome to Kiffin's Keep, an intellectual resource for the pillar and buttress of the truth, which is the church. This is a project of the London Lyceum, which is all about serious thinking for a serious church. I'm Jordan Stefaniak, president of the London Lyceum and host of Kiffin's Keep, and as always, I'm excited to be here with you all today. In today's episode, I'm going to be covering a little bit of the topic of the Southern Baptist Convention and sex abuse, and if there is or is not a crisis. Before we jump into the video, do like the video if you appreciated, found the content helpful in any way. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content. This is not our traditional content, but it is going to be the content today. So if you're interested in theological takes on Nicene theology, stay tuned for the next episode because that'll drop soon. And then do comment if you agree or disagree or have other thoughts. I imagine a lot of you will have thoughts, so comment away. No, I should start with that. No, I don't want to do an episode on this. Who would want to do an episode on sex abuse? I don't think anyone in the right mind wants to do that. The mere fact that people are discussing this on the internet is not a good thing, right? And I don't plan on doing more of these episodes. This is a one and done sort of thing. I'll occasionally tweet about these sort of things if it appears that no one else is sort of saying things that I think are important or relevant. But I do feel compelled to put together a coherent sort of monologue, the long form-ish summary of what I think about this aspect of things. And I don't think that I have any important insight. I just know that few people are willing to speak publicly on this because it's a volatile issue. And I get it. I mean, there are certain issues that you don't want to talk about, excuse me, because there's fear of repercussions, retribution if you say the wrong thing, especially on issues like this. But I've been given a measure of sort of freedom from traditional institutional control and fear, which makes it all the more necessary that people like me speak. So I don't have anything special or special insight, but I do have a platform and freedom to speak without fear of job loss, right? So I work in the normal world. I'm able to sort of provide for myself and not fear what would happen or the repercussions. I'm not an inside man of the SBC. I don't have any relationship to an SBC entity in a way of like, I'm not a student at an SBC seminary. I'm not employed by an SBC entity. So I can speak freely. I don't have strings attached like many others do. And that's no shade on them. That's just the reality of how institutions work, right? And oftentimes the institutional pressure to not say stupid things is a good thing, but sometimes it can keep important things from being said because you got to think about your family and protect them. I get that. That makes sense. But I did want to speak on this, and I want to speak on it because I saw something Denny Burke tweeted. And I should say, first of all, I'm a Southern alum myself. I love Southern. I never had Denny as a professor. I think he taught at Boyce when I was there. I think maybe he still does. I don't remember. And I have many friends who are members at Kenwood where he's an elder at, and I still have friends there. So I've got respect on that front. So there's just not supposed to be sort of like a mean sort of thing. It's just, this is a good launching pad. So Denny had a tweet, and I'm going to put it here on the screen that you can see, where it's gone fairly wide now, I think, after the Department of Justice sort of closed the case on the SBC's investigation. And his bottom line is that the SBC, there is no SBC crisis of abuse. And they didn't make a single arrest for abuse. They did the independent investigation by Guidepost, found no systemic problem with abuse. We've spent $14 million in legal fees with no problems uncovered. The problem is here is not good intentions, but the fact that we were misled by misinformation, and we can't even find a single piece of evidence. I think this is problematic for a couple of reasons, and I tweeted about that. And as expected, there were lots of replies. But let's go ahead and address some of the key issues that Denny raises here, because I think this really does matter. And so we should start on an area that I think we can all agree on. So the scriptural text like Matthew 18:5, which says, "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." I think we can all agree that those who abuse children, it's better for them to be drowned in the depth of the sea. So we agree abuse is bad and should be eradicated. And we also agree on a text like 1 Peter 5, which says, "So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, shepherd the flock of God that's among you." The shepherding aspect is fighting off wolves, both doctrinally, but also physically, and fighting them off who are trying to prey on the flock. I think we all agree on this. I think Denny agrees on this. I mean, I have no doubt that he would fight abuse if he found any in his church. Um, so I think my fear, though, is not that they wouldn't do this in their own churches. I think the sort of summary of what's happening in the SBC can embolden abusers in hiding and lower church members and church leaders guards for what is actually taking place, because the Department of Justice and Guidepost didn't investigate a bunch of SBC churches. We have no idea if there is a crisis or not. So fundamentally, at the fundamental level, we have no clue how many abusers in the SBC, none whatsoever. But let's go ahead and go through a couple of the important things. And remember, we should remember, many abusers are pastors and their flocks are unaware, right? They can trumpet the need and benefit of simple checks like background checks for volunteers, all the while avoiding them for themselves. And if the church is the pillar and buttress of the truth, it should also include matters of practical orthodoxy. It should include moral theology and moral dimension. Doctrinal fidelity includes moral things like fighting against homosexuality, fighting against crazy gender revolution things, and also fighting against sex abuse. That is a fundamental tenet of what it means to be this pillar and buttress of the truth. So let's go through a couple of things that Denny mentioned. Does the DOJ investigation mean there is no crisis of abuse? No. Why? Because the DOJ doesn't investigate those sorts of things. It doesn't investigate the local matters. It investigated SBC entities. So look here on the screen. This is from the Department of Justice website, which says it has no authority to intervene in matters of state law. Sex crimes are usually a matter of state law. And so the fact that the DOJ doesn't come up with anything doesn't tell me anything. Maybe it's true that there is nothing there, but we don't know. And so to be committed to the truth and be committed to faithful articulations of what's been put forth, it's important to not simply say, to take the next step and assume for the truth of something that hasn't been proved. Okay. So yes, it's a great thing that we don't have Pizzagate or Epstein's Island on our hands with the SBC. Let's all rejoice with that. But I'm not sure anyone thought that that's what was going on. And if they did, I would agree that they're taking crazy pills. So a second thing is, did Guidepost solely investigate a systemic problem with abuse and find nothing? And the answer again here is no. It's a little bit maddening to me that the number of people who refer to the Guidepost report seem to either misrepresent it or not have read it. So it investigated 4 different things: allegations of abuse committed by executive committee members, mishandling of abuse allegations, and allegations of mistreatment of sexual abuse victims by EC members, evidence of patterns of intimidation of sexual abuse victims by EC members, resistance to sexual abuse reform initiatives. It doesn't investigate systemic problems with abuse in this generic nebulous term, whatever that means. It investigates 4 specific things, and it finds proof of these things. Now, is it this systemic, like where you have Pizzagate or whatever it is? No, and I'm glad for that. But we do find examples of each of these things, including the biggest names to me are Johnny Hunt and David Sills. I think David Sills' information had come out a little bit before, and David is always interesting to me. So David, actually, that was my first seminary class at Southern. I remember going into his classroom in the Billy Graham wing or wherever it was of Southern, sitting down. He's a missions professor and talking about, the first thing he says, I'm a 5-point Calvinist. I remember, like, I'm a 5-point Calvinist. This is part of why I went to Southern, right? And there was this sense that even though that I was like strongly Calvinistic at this point, and I still am, but I was just like in that sort of in the cage stage. So I'm excited about it. Even then, he felt very abrasive. And then I remember years later, I was preaching at my church and he was visiting our church for some reason. Come to find out, I think he's trying to escape some of these allegations. I remember making eye contact with him during that sermon. I will never forget that moment, seeing in him the look that I saw in him, and I think it makes sense now. So David Sills, but that's all to say. I think David Sills' information was out before this, if I recall, but this gives a more detailed report on it. And then Johnny Hunt, I don't think this was out before the report. So yes, it does find these things out in the report. It's important to understand, what did Guidepost do and what did it not do. It did this, and I mean, let's see, Al Mohler in 2022 said this: "The report is devastating, heartbreaking, and infuriating." That's what Al Mohler said. So the report apparently did something, according to Al. And then he says, we spent $14 million on a wasted effort. Well, where is a good chunk of this money coming? Number one, it's not a wasted effort because we did uncover things. Number two, and number two, the members of the Southern Baptist Convention voted for it. So of course it's not wasted. It's a fulfillment of their wishes. Number three, it wasn't wasted because we did uncover people like Johnny Hunt and David Sills. Hunt is now, of course, seeking $100 million or so, in part due to emotional distress, which is what a cold, fragile, cowardly man he is. Should he have the descriptive man? I don't know. Part of that money that's being spent is people like Hunt who are suing the SBC for defamation. Now, that's important because this Joshua Abatoy guy, I think that's how you pronounce his name, he said in reply to me, "Speaking of important missing context, it appears that Guidepost also likely defamed Johnny Hunt, and the SBC may have to pay for that mistake." Likely? Who is he to say that that's likely? To me, it's going to be a matter of definition of terms. What constitutes abuse? I don't think the evidence that the report provides. I mean, the encounter happened. He's admitted the encounter happened. You have to then determine, is something abuse or not. And the fact is, I think what it's worth, the money that was paid, and we should be mad at Johnny Hunt, not mad at Guidepost, not mad at anybody else. Johnny Hunt is the bad guy in this scenario. He's the one who committed sexual acts. He's the one who is now trying to sue and get $100 million because his ego was bruised. Are we seriously defending Johnny Hunt? I think that tells you all you need to know about the position of some of these people. It's shocking, it's embarrassing, and it's something that people should be ashamed of, to defend Johnny Hunt. Plain and simple. There's no good reason to defend him. None. Zero. So is the Guidepost report reliable in any sense? I had Colin Smothers, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if I messed it up. He replied to me, and he basically said that the Guidepost report was being challenged in court, and he linked me to a tweet where it was considered hearsay, and therefore it was inadmissible, and so we should reject Guidepost. Well, we got to understand what hearsay means. So here, let me show you on the screen. This is what they're talking about. Another case where it's separate from this is saying that the Guidepost report is inadmissible because it doesn't advance a theory of decades-long cover-up, which it never did. So the plaintiff is wrong in that sense of trying to use that to suggest that there's decades-long cover-up. That's not what the report did. That's not what it focused on. So yeah, that's right. And then it's dismissed as hearsay. What is hearsay in a legal proceeding? That doesn't mean that it's just made up mumbo jumbo. It means that reports themselves are genuinely useless in a legal context. It's only valuable insofar as it identifies people who could provide testimony. That's just how the legal term works in this context. So it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's untrustworthy. It doesn't mean it's inauthentic. It just means it's not the sort of thing that can be used in a court proceeding. That's just how that works. So let's be clear on what is actually happening here. So that doesn't provide us reason to think that Guidepost just made up a bunch of stuff. It just means that it can't be used in this context unless you bring those as witnesses in the trial. And that trial that's being used here, I don't think it references, it's not against Johnny Hunt or David Sills, therefore, or some of the other people listed in the report, if I recall. So finally, does this mean we were given misinformation and have zero evidence of abuse in the SBC? No. Does the DOJ ending of their investigation prove that there's no undercover operation of sex abuse? Yeah, I think so. So I think we're good on that. I'm glad we can celebrate that. But is there a problem? I think there is. And I think Guidepost shows that there's a problem. And I think if you spend 2 seconds Googling, you'll find that there's a problem. Is it distinctively an SBC problem? I don't think so. I don't think the SBC has a proportionally larger um, group of abusers. I don't know, but no one knows because we don't have like any sort of data on that. Um, given the nature of SBC polity, it would be difficult to have a very coordinated effort of this sort. But there certainly is a problem of many unprotected, unaware churches that are unaware of deceitful, wicked people in their midst, looking for low hanging fruit. And I think adding a public list to track these sex offenders is an important first step. So, is the DOJ report a reason to celebrate? Well, in some sense, yes, but in a larger sense, no. There's still unfinished business. We still have no idea how many abusers we have in the SBC. And if we look at some examples, I think you'll see that there are still many lurking within. And I think it's important to simply say sexual abuse is wrong. We all agree with that, right? Sexual abuse is something that is common, that many sinners participate in varying degrees. Some sexual abuse is very grievous, and some is less on the scale. I mean, that's just the nature of it. So some of it's going to be very, very, very bad, and some of it's going to be lower on that scale. But it's all still very, very wrong, obviously, and we should be rooting it out in every case. And we should be equipping and encouraging and educating our churches on what it is, the signs of it to look for it, and how to stop it and how to prevent it. How to become a church that is a no-fly zone for a lot of these abusers. I mean, take a look at for example, I mean, the Jonathan Elwing, he's the guy who tweeted out that he 100% agreed with Heath Lambert's take and believed that the recommendation from the task force will end the SBC, be the end of the SBC. And maybe that isn't such a bad thing, as painful as that is to say. And this is the same guy who, look here on the screen, has like dozens of cases of being charged with capital sexual battery, production of child sexual abuse material, etc. So that's what's being hidden there from people who are trying to avoid the reality of what we need here, which is just more of a careful plan of attack and a list of keeping people away from harming others. And like I said, spend just 2 seconds Googling and you'll find all sorts of pastors who are being charged and engaged with abuse. This is a common thing. I mean, you should think that that's the case with total depravity. To realize that that is the case. So what I'm not saying is that the SBC is uniquely bad compared to others. Nope, not saying that. I'm not saying that there is necessarily a crisis. What I am saying is that the argument from the DOJ investigation to there is no crisis is not a valid argument. It's missing essential premises. So there is a necessary condition that's there, the DOJ investigation being completed and no guilt found. That's a necessary condition for the conclusion, but it's not a sufficient one. You need further evidence to be able to prove that conclusion. That's just how arguments work, okay? That's not even saying one way or another. That's just simply saying the argument is invalid as it stands. What I'm also not saying is that there is necessarily a crisis. I don't know that's the case. What I am saying, though, is that there is sex abuse and there is unidentified large numbers of it happening, and churches are under-equipped to handle this. People are not paying attention to it. People are not thinking about it. And if you talk to anybody, if you know somebody who's been abused, you realize that's a hugely underreported thing. And it's actually far more prevalent than you would think. There's a lot of people who are naive about how often sex abuse occurs. They think, oh, there's no way that this is occurring in my church. There's no way this is occurring in my convention. It's just that's only something that, I don't know, SBC in the South, probably, Roman Catholics deal with. No, that's not true. This is a common thing, and it will continue to be a common thing throughout history. And that's why we always have to have cognizant eyes wide open to this sort of thing and be fighting it. And that should be a very agreeable thing to say. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So the reality for what I'm trying to say here is, look, the DOJ investigation and guidepost doesn't necessarily tell us anything about a crisis. So I think, number one, what did guidepost actually investigate? It investigated the 80-ish members of the EC. What did the DOJ investigate? Based on that, no matter what their findings were, that doesn't tell us anything about the SBC at large. This is a comment I wrote about this last August in an essay. And a portion of it, I was critiquing a book called Shepherds for Sale. And in it, it's grossly misunderstanding the scope of the investigation. The scope of the investigation is the EC, the Executive Committee. It is not all of the members of the SBC churches. So it tells us nothing about how many cases of sexual abuse there actually are in SBC churches. Are there a lot more than others? Again, I don't know, and I don't think so. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be fighting it, that we shouldn't be caring about it, that we shouldn't be seeking and advocating to uncover it where it is. Because like we've seen here with what's his name, Jonathan, right? Jonathan Owing. That's an example of someone who is hiding significant, grievous, terrible sin and fighting against these proposals because of that. How many others are like that we don't know of, that are actively fighting these things? If we want to talk about where Satan's at work, that's it. Child pornography, sexual battery, that is satanic. Okay? It's not Rachel Denhollander. She's not the demonic person in the background. You guys need to stop being obsessed with people like that and start fighting the actual enemy, those who are committing grievous sins. Open your eyes. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but this is an important matter, okay? So let's make clear arguments. Let's understand what's actually at stake, and let's take the appropriate measured action to these sorts of things. Okay, that's what I've got here for this. Let me know what you think. If you think I missed something, go ahead and tell me. I imagine some of you do. If you disagree, feel free to comment as well. I'm always open for those sorts of disagreements. I think disagreement is good. I think disagreement is healthy. I think disagreement on difficult, challenging topics is an important thing to do. It helps you to come to an actual understanding of a topic. And oftentimes, it's through repetitive disagreement and dialogue that you come to change your opinion on something. You come to change your mind on something. So I think those sorts of things are good. They develop healthy relationships with people to dialogue in serious fashion, to disagree in serious fashion, not in demeaning ways, not in name-calling ways, not in silly ways, but in real, let's debate the actual merits of facts and debate the nature of arguments. That's just good philosophy, right? So those are things that we should be doing, and I want to advocate for. So please disagree with me if you think, but I think I've got a very compelling case here to say that no matter what you think, what we have now doesn't tell us anything about the at-large nature of the SBC and abuse. And the reality is, whether it's a crisis or not is irrelevant to the fact that there is abuse, and we should take steps to fight that where we can. Even if that number is just a small portion, you should say, those people matter, those lives matter. Let's do what we need to do and take the steps we need to take. And that doesn't require us to then go on a witch hunt. It doesn't require us to become crazy people. We can be measured people and say, this matters. Let's take these necessary steps of precaution to fight against this. Let's have a list. Let's have additional resources. Let's have these things. Let's go educate some of these smaller churches or these other churches that aren't properly vetting volunteers or aren't properly vetting their pastor, aren't discerning enough to know this pastor's actually preying on the children in the church. I think those are important things, and we should be caring about them. I think people do care about them, but I don't think they're realizing the depths of depravity of some people. So let me know what you think. I appreciate you all listening or watching, whichever version you're doing, and I look forward to thinking with you all soon.